Welcome back to the show, Mr. Ian. Now, you did some traveling recently. Tell me about this little adventure you went on. Did you discover the ends of the world where the flat earthers say the ice ball or whatever? I'm not even going to get into that one.
um, I will say I found well, it's almost the end of the earth. I mean, Yuma, Arizona is pretty much like the end of the earth. When you look at it, it looks like the surface of the moon. But yeah, no, it was. I don't think I discovered anything new except for my dislike of the cold was reinforced because it was like 80s and beautiful, and then I came home and it wasn't, and I got grumpy.
I don't think you're alone in that argument because if you really look, the weather is changing drastically, which kind of goes against my like, oh, global warming. It's kind of a bit of I believe it's real. I just don't think the severity of it, as people are saying, like we're all going to die in the next 5 years or something like that. I'm like, okay, well, they've been saying that for generations upon generations. But what's freaking me out is they're now doing civilian trips up into space where like people are I think there's the first woman that was up there. She paid $10 million or something like that. And I'm just like, let me get a
Yeah.
little bit of that. Just a sliver of that.
Give me not even 10%, 5% of that. I'll be happy.
But $10 million for a ticket, like I don't even paying like $1.50 for the bus is a lot for me. So I'm like, I'm not broke. I'm cheap, I guess. I don't know. I'm very frugal with my money, but $10 million to go up into space and do what? Did you see the dome that they were talking about, like doing hotels on the moon and stuff like that? And did you see the size of the rooms? They were small. And it's not like you can go out and walk around. You're confined to the room. So it's like, okay, yeah, you can walk around the hotel maybe, but unless you got like a pool inside, I don't really see the benefit besides like after an hour, you get bored.
For real. So I would imagine it's a lot like a boat, because like space in the ocean, like as far as like travel goes, is the same. Like, they talk about like fleets, and a lot of the language is the same. So you think about on a cruise ship or a freaking, ferry, like your quarters are very small. They're very tight because space is at a premium. So I would assume it's the same. But yeah, man, it would be boring. Like you go to the moon to sit in a freaking 5 by 10 cell with a fancy bed, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
What's the jet lag on a trip to the moon? Like, is
Oh,
that like a couple hours?
sweet Jesus, who knows?
Can you imagine the layover time? Like, if Southwest has issues just trying to get like to the next state beside you, then what is NASA's issues with?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I mean, what happens when like your whole flight just gets fucking shut off because it's raining? you know?
That's probably one of my biggest fears is being like in an airplane like that explodes or crashes. Cause then I'm like, I don't want to survive that. Like I know people are like, I want to survive, but I just watched like a whole hour like interview of like a man that survived a plane crash. He had no ears, like you couldn't tell he had lips. He had no eyebrows. His whole face was just completely like burned off. His whole body was burned all over. And I've heard stories from like the Blink 182 drummer Travis Barker, he was talking about his plane accident, him surviving it, and that's why he has all these tattoos all over his bodies to cover up some of those scars. And I'm like, fuck, man, like I don't know if I could be able to handle that. Like, I mean, I know people talk about like the Men in Black, they shaved down all their facial features to look like this undistinguished, so you couldn't tell who they were and be able to identify them. But I'm like, dude, I don't even know.
That's one of my biggest when it comes to like a traumatic death. I don't want to feel anything. You know what I mean? And that's my lack of concern for death in skydiving, right? Is if everything goes wrong, I'm not going to feel a thing because terminal velocity, impact with the earth, it's but he gone, so I won't feel any pain. That's why like I'm terrified of like ladders and roofs, and I know you and I have talked about this before. Like those short distance heights, 100 feet and down, petrify me, absolutely petrify me because I'm going to feel everything. Oh yeah,
Not the fear of plummeting into the earth at like a million miles an hour because you're falling out of an airplane. Like that's got to be the biggest fear is like when you jump out of the airplane, your brain somehow realizes that you just jumped out of like this safety, this thing that you were like your vehicle of transportation. It's like if you're driving on the highway and you jump out of your car, your brain's like, "Oh shit, we just got out of the car. Like we're going 100 miles an hour."
if you knew the actual maintenance state of some of these airplanes, you would be much more comfortable with jumping out of them because there's a whole lot of airplanes I would much rather jump out of than land with because They probably got a few more good ones in them, but I'm going to trust that parachute a lot more than I'm going to trust that airplane.
I like when I read a headline and it tells me man survives plane accident, and then he's like, he was so lucky. I'm like, well, is he though? Is he? Because he can't fucking move. All he can do is blink and he eats through a tube. That sounds very unlucky to me when you survive something like that. Like, imagine trying to survive a plane crash. They say, oh, you're very lucky that you survived. Okay, the man has PTSD or has some type of fear for the rest of his life, where every day he wakes up screaming, watching his grandma fly out of the side of the airplane as it tore apart into pieces in midair. Like, that to me seems not lucky at all. That's horrible. That's a horror movie.
That was incredibly like specific.
I
You
try and go
thought
into the
about that.
details. You know me.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
I like to paint a picture.
You're 7 layers deep on this one. You should write a story.
Well, I was watching The Gray, and then like he crashed, and then it was like the wolves were slowly. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it, but like the wolves were slowly hunting them all down and stuff like that, and like picking them off one by one. And then somehow that movie led me into the whole meat versus vegan debate, and then like I just kept going deep. Well, all right, so here's how
Say
that led into
more.
that.
Yeah.
So I'm watching The Gray. I'm watching these wolves hunt down and kill these things. I'm like, well, this is a good thing that we have like survival techniques and we've hunted wolves before. So like we learned from that. But then I was listening to a vegan and meat debate, and I don't think there's really a debate. I agree with whatever you want to eat as a diet preference, but it's the part that gets me with the feminists too, is when like they see me at the age of 20, and then I've had people that like even a couple episodes ago come on and be like talking to me like I have never talked to anybody in my entire life. I'm like, did you check my episode list? Like, I'm not fucking two. Like, I know how to have a conversation, and they're like teaching me. Well, this is what happens with podcasting. See, this goes. I'm like looking at them like I have no idea what you're talking. What are analytics? I have no clue. And I just whenever you talk to someone who's vegan, they're like, your meat is murder. I'm like, I get that. It is. It is murder. You're killing to get the food, but you can do it in a proper form. And this is where I think that, especially when it comes down to this debate of a topic as well, too. And it goes back to your friend that I think we're probably going to talk about most of this episode that a lot of people don't really like. And I just think because he has strong opinions and strong views, Jordan Peterson, that man is very intelligent.
Mhm.
I was listening to a podcast of him this morning. I was doing all this stuff, prepping for you when you come on the show. When this guy talks, he's very, very analytical and very, very logical in a lot of the things he says. And I think we can both agree that his side of like, people attack him. They don't really understand what he's saying. They see a very, very distorted perception of who this person is. And I believe that's just the factor of social media and trying to sense text and all these types of things that we've talked about before. And I'm like, if you really sit down and listen to the guy, he's not what people paint him out to be. And I'm like, that's the same thing with vegans. Instead of them painting a picture and saying that if you eat meat, you're a horrible person. I'm like, but you won't just find that with vegans. You won't just find that with Jordan Peterson. You won't find that with anything. You'll find that with everything, not just one. It's everything. Whatever someone I mean, recently I was contacted by a bunch of people on Twitter who were atheist, but they're like, I will prove to you religion is wrong. And I'm like, I want to talk to you about this because I'm like, I don't see the point in trying to dismiss somebody's religion. I only see the point in what you're doing is if someone is telling somebody that they need to believe or they're going to hell. There's a balance to the whole system, but seems like people want to keep dipping their hands in someone else's cookie jar.
You're absolutely right, and religion's that weird one too, because I'm 100% with you. What would bother me most about being approached like that is you're coming into the conversation with an agenda. You're not coming into a conversation. You're coming in to sell me something. That's a sales pitch. I don't, dude, I'm not buying a fucking thing. Let's talk about it. Let's, by all means, like share with me, educate me, give me all of your information, right? And then show me where you gathered all of that information, and I'll listen to you, and then I'll go and I'll read through the information that you provided me, and then I'll either, you know, choose to agree with you on some things, disagree with you on everything, or whatever. But either way, it's irrelevant. But coming into that conversation with, I'm going to show you that religion's bullshit. Well, you already put me in a freaking non dude, I don't care. Like, stop. Don't, no, you're coming in for an argument. I don't want an argument. Let's talk about it. I'm open to talk about anything. I will listen to anything. I might disagree with everything you say and have counterpoints to that, but at least we're talking, and I'm never going to try to sell you anything. I'm just going to say, hey, look, what about this? Well, have you read this? Maybe think about that. And I am open and receptive to having all of that said back to me. Well, have you looked at this and this? Shit, let's go. Let's go. If I come out of that conversation smarter, fuck, that's a win, man.
Well, okay, pick a food item you hate that you would absolutely refuse.
Durian.
The fuck is durian?
It is this fruit. I think it's classified as a fruit from Thailand. Dude, I'm telling you, it is. It is so bad. We did a 2-week trip with my job and did some training there, and the folks that we were training with, they're like, "Oh, try this. This is so good," and it's super rude to show dislike of a gift from them, and so I choked down the single most disgusting thing I have ever put in my mouth.
Okay, pick a food you really enjoy, one that
Uh,
you would want all the time.
all the time. Dude, I'm a fucking sucker for Arby's roast beef sandwiches.
God damn, you picked something I really enjoy too. Shit. I was
Okay,
hoping I could like try and counterpoint it, but
tacos.
what? I love tacos even more than the roast beef sandwich at Arby's.
Well, then there's no pleasing you.
Okay, hold on.
How
All
about
right, so the roast
smoking a
beef.
pancake?
So the smoking a pancake. The roast beef sandwich, for instance, I
There
will
we
counterpoint and say that it's actually a very, very terrible food and nobody should ever eat it. Okay, so your points are what?
go. My point would be that's a very interesting point that I don't necessarily agree with. Please tell me more. Like, why do you believe that it is the worst food ever?
Okay, let's try that again. Give me a bunch of things of why you love the sandwich and why you would always eat it.
Oh, the flavor's great. It's a texture thing for me. I love the texture of roast beef. I'm not too crazy about the bread, but the bread's always like the half part of it. You know what I mean? It just has that just I don't know. And it's a feel good meal. I grew up on it, as a kid, and and that's one of the weird fast food niches that I have just carried on with me to adulthood.
Yeah, you got to make sure that you get it at like the right Arby's at the right time though, because sometimes you get it and like the bread is really soggy, and you're like, "What are you doing?" Like, you ever have those whatever? It's where you used to dip the beef on the sandwich into some type of juice or some type of
The
thing.
OG sauce. What is it's a fucking yeah, I forget the name of the sandwich, but I know exactly what you're talking
But
about.
it makes the bread really kind of soggy,
Yeah,
especially if you let it sit. Well, a lot of times you get an Arby's sandwich and the bread's soggy. You're like, "What the fuck is this?"
yeah.
This isn't what I wanted. But the counterpoint to that would be for me saying that I dislike that sandwich. I don't think anybody should eat it. Already, I'm making a very drastic claim in that saying of nobody should ever eat the sandwich, because now you're saying that just because you don't enjoy the sandwich, that no one else should be able to enjoy it because it is based on whatever your perspective is or whatever information that you have, that you're going to completely cut that off from the rest of the world. Okay. So here we go. Roast beef sandwiches. Well, did you know that the meat is done very badly and made in a very bad facility? They actually slaughter these animals. They use them for industrial. And I just started bringing up all these points. Nobody is wrong in this conversation.
True.
The weird part about a debate is it's very, very fun. I love conversation, but debates are interesting because it is an intellectual match. But here's the thing that Jordan Peterson says: when things become a game, it's a clear winner and a clear loser. He goes, but is it so? Why does there have to be a loser? Isn't there a way of just having a discussion, nobody getting down to things? And it goes down to like where you see a lot of videos of people whenever he's getting interviewed is they start questioning him. They start bringing up all these things like, but you said this, but you said that. And he starts explaining himself even more deeper and kind of more critical. And I'm like, this is why the man doesn't do fucking interviews. And every time he does an interview and you see a video of it on YouTube, he looks pissed off because he's just waiting for someone to come and attack him. And I'm like, that's the world today. Is if you have it so distorted into your head that it needs to be this way, then nobody else can think differently. And I'm like, that's the issue. It's not like chess. It's not like these types of things. There are certain aspects of chess that can relate to a debate discussion, but when you're literally looking to win and not listening to the other person and not hearing them out, there should be no winner and there should be no loser. This isn't like playing sports. This is one that actually everyone should get a participation trophy, because just because your point is different from somebody else's doesn't mean that they're wrong or one's right. It just means that you both have different ways of thinking about things. I mean, there's certain, I mean, half the time we don't even know the correct information to be true information. If I would have told you right now that, what do you know about the Titanic?
That there was plenty of room for Jack on that floaty thing. Rose was
Hmm.
just being a selfish bitch. No, what do I know about Titanic? I know that it was a leadership failure. That I know that it had the capability to go very fast, and they wanted to demonstrate that capability, despite the subject matter experts saying this was a bad idea because of this, and this. But his inability to stand up to the stakeholders and cause the ship to go down and the captain to go with it. So that's so. What context are we going to with the Titanic? Are we looking because there's
How did the Titanic go down?
small puncture holes along the hull from a iceberg that they could not avoid because they were going too fast?
What if I told you that wasn't true?
I'm open to hear more. I'm not very educated on it, so
So a lot of people don't know
like,
that there was a survivor of the Titanic that actually wrote a book on the whole entire thing. He actually wrote multiple books on the thing. And he said that in his cabin, explains the whole situation about how there's this large explosion, and all these people started falling off their bunks. There was about three guys in one room. One of them was the survivor that wrote a book. He saw one of the guys was on the ground unconscious. They picked him up and carried him out of the room, not knowing that they were never going to be able to return to that room again because the boat was going to start sinking. Um, he says there was no visual sight of something that they hit. There was just a random explosion. And then now people are starting to look at the theory, which was suggested back in the day, was actually there was an explosion in the bottom hull of the ship where they were throwing in the coal for the fire,
yep.
because the coal was burning. Everything down in the lower part of the ship was burning. It was an explosion, not an iceberg. And now people are starting to relook at this, that maybe they've kind of done it for too long, but also the Titanic's so far back in the past that people are like, yeah, that'd be cool to understand if it was a different conspiracy theory. But there's a lot of other things on everyone's mind right now. But the way this guy survived was him and his buddy were at the tip of the Titanic, or his partner or whatever that was living in the dorm with him in one of the rooms. They both jumped off. As soon as they hit the water, they both got separated by a wave. So he's in below freezing cold temperatures, about to die. He sees one of these lifeboats come by and he tries to grab onto it. But here's the issue. And this is where people are going to be like, well, they should pull him up on the boat. Logically speaking, they were already at max capacity on the life raft. So at any, maybe a certain amount of weight can actually cause the boat to sink. And now you're killing 15, 20 people instead of just letting one person die. So they were thinking logically in the sense that they did not put him onto the boat. They just hit him with the paddle and, moved him like, nah, get down, get down. Um, but
Now he's freezing to death with a fucking head trauma.
So the next thing he remembers is that he passed out because it was so cold. His arms, legs, everything went numb. He was basically floating up in the water and he just passed out. Then he wakes up in a hospital room, and a woman had come up to him and said, I'm the person that saved your life. Here's your passport and here's your money. And they ended up becoming very good friends later. But he writes a book about it. As her side of the story was when she was on the life raft and they said, no, we cannot take you. Right as soon as he was drifting away and he passed out, she screamed to them saying, that's my son. I just lost my husband on that ship. That's my son. And they decided to take on the extra weight. And luckily, the lifeboat did not go down. But as I was listening to this guy explain his story, and then also this was right after the plane crash guy too. So I was like, damn, fucking, I'm afraid of the air. Well, let's see what's wrong with the sea. And then I went over to the Titanic. But as he was, writing these books and explaining all these things, it's a very likely possibility that we might have gotten a piece of the story wrong, and then we've been believing it for so long. There's certain aspects in today's times where we don't even know. Like, let's talk about the food industry. A lot of people don't really know about cornflakes being created to prevent masturbation, on the fact that sugar leads to your passions increasing. And Sir Harvey Kellogg thought that if you were all sugared up or whatever, you're going to be sex driven, because he was looking at spicy foods too. foods with extreme amount of taste, he was like, this causes your sexual prowess to increase. So he was looking at spicy foods such as like tacos, anything you put hot sauce on. He considered all those bad, so he wanted to make it as bland as possible. And I'm looking at it like, I was just listening to a podcast. I think his name is Mike something. Mike, I'll send you. It's a nutrition podcast, I would say. But he's a CrossFit guy. He actually is one of the keto diet proprietors, and actually made his own food company as well. But he was talking about how like everyone says like, when I say noon, what do you think? Like, what comes to your mind when I say the word noon? Like, what do you usually associate noon with?
Lunchtime.
Lunchtime. And he goes, are you even hungry though? Or are you just eating because that's the time that's in your head to eat? Who's to say breakfast? Who's to say that's the most important meal of the day? Who's to say that? These were all started by larger corporations to get you basically programmed into living this way and can keep consuming the fucking product. So I'm like, I don't consider anybody wrong anymore. These debates on whether this is that or this is that, I'm like, and technically, in the eyes of that person, they might have information that we don't know yet. There might be information we don't know yet. Was JFK shot? Are aliens actual things? I don't know. There's this whole concept that goes deeper and deeper and deeper when you start seeing that information keeps constantly. It's an endless river of knowledge. And the fact that you want to dismiss someone else's information because you feel like your information is more important rather than associate both information as valuable in different perspectives.
Yeah. So going back to the Titanic thing, though, I would say this, and just ask this question: is it possible that the explosion he heard was them? Was it wasn't? It sounded like an explosion, but it wasn't. It was them hitting the iceberg. Is that possible? Now, before we answer that, right? Or was the explosion a secondary effect of them hitting the iceberg? Are
That's
those
what
things possible? So it's, and not saying that you're wrong, right? I'm accepting the fact that it could be something
yeah.
that we don't think it was, right? Because the stories have been passed down that this is what it is. And maybe hitting an iceberg was a more easily excusable thing than an engine exploding, right? Because now, why did the engine explode? Well, the engine exploded because they took, liberties and
Ah,
shortcuts back. So they're trying to save the company, right? The HMS, whatever, or I don't know what that. No, that's just the thing. Whatever the company that made the Titanic, right? Maybe they're trying to cover the fact that they built a shitty engine that blew up and killed a bunch of people
that's what
by
I'm
saying,
saying.
hey, it's some natural stuff, right? So that's totally possible. And I would absolutely 100% like receive that information and say, cool, show me where you read this. Give me the points, give me the places. Let me look into it. And maybe my opinion doesn't change at the end of the day. Maybe I don't see the same evidence that you do. So I'm gonna stay an iceberg guy. You're an engine explosion guy, and that's cool. That's totally fine. I'm gonna acknowledge that that's an absolute possibility. But at the end of the day, it's all that. But I'm not gonna grab a sign and start freaking protesting out in front of Rob's house. you know, the Titanic was an iceberg. You know what I mean? Like that's horseshit.
From
I'm not,
his experience, he talks about how when he was at the top of the ship, like because when the one part of it broke and then went all the way under, and the other
Mhm.
one broke, and then suddenly the other half of it just started slowly going upwards at an angle, then slowly started sinking down. When he got to the tip of that ship before he jumped, he was talking about he didn't see any icebergs. So it really brings him to a point of like,
But didn't it take like a few hours to sink though?
it was a few hours, yeah. But you got to think you're at the bottom of the ship. That's going to
Yeah.
take an hour and a half to drag another person with another guy all the way up to the top of the ship. And then you're sitting there contemplating on whether you want to jump or not. So it's like, even if it took a couple of hours, there was no movement of the boat, though. It stayed in the same position. It's like when you throw your anchor off, there wasn't a drift or anything like that.
Bet you there was though, because if they were hauling ass and then they hit this thing, that momentum's going to carry them for a while.
Yeah, but what's hauling ass compared to hauling ass today compared to back in the day wouldn't be probably even
I
close.
mean,
Maybe
what's
5 miles an hour.
motion doesn't stop unless it's met by an opposite, an equal reaction, right? Or whatever that fucking theory is. So without anything to stop it, right? Without them running into something to get them to a full stop. Now they would have been crawling at a pace. And the whole reason I'm saying this, have you seen the video where there's like 5 people and they're passing a basketball? And the premise to the video is count how many times they pass the basketball. And you watch and you count and you count and you count. You're like, okay, cool. I counted 13 times. And they're like, all right, cool, 13. what is, what color was the gorilla? And you're like, what fucking gorilla? And then you watch the video again, and legit from left to right, very slowly, while these people are passing a basketball, a gorilla walks by that you don't ever fucking see. So it's possible. I would say to that, like, he didn't see it because he was in survival mode. The iceberg may have been literally right there next to him.
Yeah, that's
But
possible.
that wasn't his focus was on survival. So, your body says, that iceberg is not a danger. This is the danger. So focus on this to survive this.
Or maybe the fact, like, when you see a car that hits a wall and the car stops, wouldn't if the boat kept going or kept floating and you're talking about the iceberg going away or just drifting away because the boat's still moving, wouldn't they stop because they were stopped by an outside force like an iceberg?
Uh, from the accounts, it it didn't go like straight into it.
It went
Uh,
from the side.
it pushed it down the side, so it would have diverted, and shot off to the side. I'm making hand motions off camera that you can't see. So that motion still would have gone. Now it would have changed its course. It would have pushed it off in a 45-degree angle. But as it continued to freaking bump down the side of the boat, yeah, theoretically, as it has been described, you know what I mean, it would have deflected and pushed it off to the side. It still would have kept moving at, whatever their speed was, 18, 20 knots, which is, it's only what, 25 miles an hour ish, you know.
I
Uh,
still think you would hear a giant as the side of the ship was ripping rather than just he said it was dead silent and then just heard an explosion. And that was where the furnace was where they were pumping in the coal because the coal was on fire too. Like even coal that was outside of the furnace, like that was on fire. So that had to be from an explosion. So unless that hit perfectly, its first hit was right into the engine. It didn't do this scraping motion. Then maybe an explosion. But like we said, we weren't there, so we weren't going to be able to talk about it. But it does make a little bit of effort to that conspiracy theory on the factor of like if you talk about a ship or the company that owns the ship, they create this unsinkable thing. You tell everybody this ship is unsinkable, and then it fucking sinks. And you say, well, it was from an action of nature. It was a natural disaster type thing, rather than the ship was engine was malfunctioned and it exploded, and then you wouldn't have to pay all this large sum of cash to all these family members and people that are still living today. I mean, their
True.
families still living. Their ancestors were on the Titanic and stuff like that. It made me think a little bit deeper onto this question because my grandpa had worked at a place called BB Hospital for like, man, 24 years. I think he worked there a year before I was born. I was born at that exact same hospital. Um, hospital. And he was, I think, last year he was like I think he was close to retirement, like about to get his pension, about to get his like his benefits and all that for retiring from BB Hospital. And they slowly, like throughout the past couple of years, have been putting him on lesser and lesser jobs. And I thought it was because he was getting old and he kept saying, I could fucking do it. I can clean. Like I used to be the maintenance guy. Now I'm a cleaner. And I'm like, so what's and I asked him what he's doing now. He goes, well, I couldn't get my retirement benefits because they reduced me down so low and then they just got rid of me before I could hit my retirement thing. And I was like, damn, how many companies do that? Like how many companies do some really shady shit, cut the corners because they don't want to have to, because they consider you winning when you leave and they're still paying you even though you're not working for them anymore. Like it happens, man. So it really brings to a point of like, if it was an explosion, if this guy got to the tip of the thing, he was looking for, a safety, looking for an island, and he didn't come across an iceberg. Instead, he jumped into the water, didn't see anything, and then he was luckily saved. I was like, does it really bring us to the point of like maybe there's a factor of information that a lot of people don't want out there, stuff that's being locked to us? I mean, what 500 documents of the JFK thing were supposed to be released, and there's still 50 that they kept reserved. What is on those 50 things that you consider not important for us to know, or something we're too scared to know? And this is like, and I think this is only going to get worse. I only think the secret of information, all these types of things that are happening are only going to keep getting worse. And we're going to experience more problems because people are just, they're too fighting each other all the time. And I'm like, if you're looking at the eyes of a superior, which I honestly think more and more now, especially after the pandemic or still going with the pandemic, but after the beginning of this thing, um, man, I don't feel like there's something like if I talk to an Elon Musk is way more advanced than me. He's gonna look at me like a lesser intelligent human being. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Um, Actually, I'm probably gonna cry a little bit. Uh, but if he's looking at me like I'm a lesser human being because I can't keep a conversation with him because he's just so far into what he's into, and it's just me talking, I just seem dumb. Um, who's looking at Elon Musk like he's the dumb one? There's got to be someone above him. I believe there's always that very, very superior whatever intellect or a person that sees a different, like even when you talk about Eric Weinstein, the man is mentally challenged. He is classified as on the spectrum. But when you talk to him or when you look at like some of the conversations or podcasts that he's been on, like with Joe Rogan, he's fucking intelligent as hell. He actually gave me the example, not just talking about my grandfather BB Hospital, but talking about Harvard. So many people that were like in good standing with Harvard, he would, and he did this to Obama too. Harvard did. They told him, "Hey, you're going to need to move to this location if you want to continue working on your thesis paper." And it's a way of distracting them from the research that they're doing. If they start researching something that Harvard seems as not important or seems as a problem, they will say, "Hey, we need you to move here." And you're like, "But then I can't continue my research. And then I have to uproot my whole entire family to move to this thing." Yeah, you have to do that. And if you don't, they just terminate you. He
Mhm.
talks about this on many accounts of this happening to a lot of people who were on the cusp of something that had to give up their research because they had to move to stay in good standing with Harvard. These elite companies and elite people are able to like find a way to make you go away. In China, we saw that with the actress lady. She come out and said a bunch of stuff that was against, I guess, the Chinese government. They made her disappear.
Yeah.
She came back a couple months later and she said, "I am so sorry. I'm in support of my Chinese government." And then said, whoever the leader is, and said, his name 3 times or something like that, in support of him,
Like
says that,
or something.
well, you start to look at that, like, what is like there's more information out there that is being kept away from us. And I think that is a factor of because people are so willing to argue over the very, very dumb stuff and not look at the bigger picture of things. This is supposed to be, if we were all a civilized society, I would say, every country, especially, no countries out in this matter. But if we were all like very, very intellectual and very, very like calming in the way we are being, I guess, given news, maybe we would have a lot more information known to us. I mean, the fact that aliens were being hidden from us for so long because of the factor of we probably a lot of people would freak out and won't be able to handle it. But then they threw like, during the pandemic and everything, and this is where we get into conspiracy territory of the pandemic is just guys from the government. In some parts, I believe it might be. If you really look at it, like we're all living in fear and they're still keeping us in fear, telling us that even if we get a vaccine, we'll still be able to get coronavirus. I'm like, when does the fear go away? Why do I have to have a COVID passport to fly? That one governor put up, it's the mark of the beast. They're telling they're telling you now that it's soon going to affect driving. You're not going to be able to drive unless you have your fucking COVID passport. I'm like, so it's kind of like when you're driving an auto car and you go a little bit too far and it says area locked and you're like, what the fuck do you mean area locked? And it starts to say returning to home, returning to home. And you're like, wait a minute, I want to go to Cancun. That's where I was going. I'm not Ted Cruz. Don't hate me.
Yeah, I think that there's well there was a lot there to unpack. I would agree that
When
uh
do I ever come with very, very small things? I always hit you with a
that's
bunch of shit.
that's true, and I'm not writing down, so I'm gonna have to go from memory on this. So I agree with you. I think that the pandemic is real. Let me state that right up front. I think
I
it's
do too.
the virus is real, and I think it's dangerous, and it kills a lot of people. I
Yes.
think that's a fact. There's scientific evidence for all of that, and science doesn't give a shit about your politics or your feelings. So therefore, you know what I mean. Like this is a real thing. But what has happened is the reaction to the pandemic has become this this political monster. People have taken it and used it to become this political thing and use it as and you see the waves. It's really interesting to watch. So coming off of the Christmas holiday downturn, right? People stopped traveling as much, so there was less cross contamination, there was less spread. The hospitals kind of got their shit back together after the big surge, and things started going well. And then the vaccine starts rolling out and people start crushing the vaccine, and it starts getting even better. And then um, all of a sudden, it seems we're on this high road, and now all of the news is saying, here it comes. Oh God, we're in trouble. We're still freaking better. All this, you know what I mean? And it just it feels as though we can't celebrate a victory. We cannot be given that little tick of freedom, which is an anomaly in and of itself and a whole different conversation. But if we get too much, if we get too comfortable, they're going to freaking, like, they do the alarmist headline bullshit and send us back to our homes in fear. And that's probably one of the most frustrating things. I'm a mask advocate. Wear a fucking mask. Wear it. Do it. Just fucking do it. And if the business uh that you frequent says you don't have to wear one and that makes you mad, go find a different business. And then a lot of these other people, the anti-mask side of it, well, those private businesses say in order to use our services you have to wear a mask. Oh, my civil liberties are nope, that's a
What
private
about
business.
the support of the private businesses that don't care if you wear a mask or not?
I'm all for it. It's that business's choice. Now, whether I choose to go in or not, that's on me. Whether I choose to frequent that company, I would walk into a restaurant that had zero masks, or wear masks until your food arrives. If I like that restaurant and I enjoy their food, I'm going to apply whatever rules work. And what I'm going to do just for me, because of how I am now and how I've been conditioned, I'm going to wear my mask when I walk into the restaurant until I sit down. Here in Massachusetts, it's rolled back a little bit, so it's a little less strict now. But for a while there, you had to wear your mask until your food showed up. So even when your drinks came, you could drop your mask to take a drink, but you couldn't take your mask off until your food showed up. So, which, hey, you know what? I'm still going. I'm just going to keep my mask on. No big fucking deal to me, honestly.
Well,
It's
as much as there's the anti-maskers, there's also the super maskers, which are the ones that go to the businesses and sit there and picket fence and riot outside and call the cops on those businesses because those owners choose not to have a mask policy. It's both sides of the spectrum are an issue. You know what I find interesting though? So I sent you that vaccine thing. Now hold on before we go into like it's over. I get it. It's all vaccines. I wasn't freaked out by that. I kind of figured that was a thing. But what I found super interesting about that, which I don't think you thought I thought was interesting, so they're using fetal cells in the vaccine development stages process, not in the actual vaccine. So you don't have fetal cells in the vaccine you got, but in the
right.
development, the research of it, they use them from the fucking 80s. And I'm like, why the 80s? And then it starts explaining, like, because people look at, like, if I tell you you're going to get this shot and during the development stages of the shot there were fetal cells from 80s babies, and you're like, okay, that's fucking weird, but it's not going to like cause a giant alarm. But then if I tell you this one from 2020 or 2021, you're like, holy shit, what are you doing? It's like the newer it is, the more it'll freak you out. But as if we go back to, like, does that mean I can go back to like the 1500s and pull out a placenta cells from something like that and that's okay? Like, when's the statute of limitations on using this, and why do we have this in our brain correlated as being wrong? It's kind of like when I give you the stereotypical, like, what do they always say about the South? Like, which, if I would say, like, he's from the South, what do you automatically take from that?
He has an awesome accent and makes really good food.
Okay, I know that's
People
gonna.
are we talking like Civil War shit? Are we talking like Confederacy? What are you
If
going?
I say somebody is from the South, when you're looking at like what that IQ of that person is, what would you consider that has been stereotypically popularized throughout the whole nation of being slower South? You would consider, like, oh, shoot, dang, the cowboy hat style type, slower, lower thinking, I would say. Did you know how that even started?
Well, a lot of this has ties back to the Confederacy and Civil War and right before and shortly after. But
Do you want me to explain it?
I mean, if
It's
you
from a
still
tapeworm. It's from a tapeworm. That whole slower, lower South thing did not start from the Confederacy. It started because of a fucking tapeworm. Because people that were when the original colonies, whatever, when they started exploring and going farther out and discovering more land and taking more territory, they started realizing that when they came closer to the South, there were these people that were fatigued and just slow in thinking, like very, very like if you were half asleep when we were doing the podcast, you'd be a little bit slower than you are talking to me now. You would be like, I've still got to wake up. I need to have some coffee or something. These people were very kind of like drowsy and all these sudden symptoms. And then this popular rumor got started, this stereotypical thing of that they're slower in the South, when really they were all suffering from a tapeworm. I had just read this article that I'll send you, and I was like, that's fucking fascinating because everybody in Delaware, state right above me, they call it slower, lower Delaware because everything down there is so slow. Everybody goes 10 miles under the speed limit. And I'm like, because it's filled with fucking old people. There are still people that go the fucking speed limit there, that normal people like myself in their 20s or something like that, that'll go above the speed limit, whatever. But since some people stereotypicalized it as slower, lower Delaware, that's known as that state now. Whenever you go there, oh, man, turn slower, lower Delaware. Doesn't mean it's true. I don't think 100%, but I think there's some things you could point out to be like, that's a little bit slow. You know, this dude's taking like an hour and a half to write a damn check for a fucking $2 thing of milk. Like, what the hell? Um, but I also think it is a concept of these rumors, these stereotypes that get started. Like, I had talked to a guy recently. He owns the Florida podcast, I think it's called. His name's George. Shout out to him if he's listening. But what do you stereotypicalize Florida to be? A crazy place, right? Like this fucking place of like monstrous like actions and alligators and everybody wants to golf and fucking all this crazy shit. I had talked to this guy for an hour and I swear a minute in, I was like, man, you have the Florida podcast. But then I look at your Twitter and you're citing Socrates. You're citing all these like poetries and stuff and talking to him. We start talking about slavery. We start talking about a bunch of things that get, disingenuous to Florida when Florida has a lot of amazing qualities to it. The people are very nice there. There is a certain stereotypes, but that's not everybody. That place is actually filled with culture because it has the most, I guess, variation of ethnicities down there. A lot of people aren't really worried about another person. They're busy to have fun. They're at same thing with me being in a tourist town to have fun. And this is how these stereotypes get started. And then they dismiss people from that place. It's the same thing with the South with this tapeworm. It goes down even farther when it comes to maskers and anti-maskers. Maskers consider people that are anti-mask, lower intelligence, not understanding the full capability, and the anti-maskers see it from a whole different perspective. I'm like, just worry about your goddamn self. Is it that fucking hard to do? It's really not. I fucking stay up in the middle of the night sometimes wondering what the hell my life's going to be. I don't have time or any amount of effort that I want to invest into someone else's thing. When I sent you that vaccine thing about the cells, sent it to someone in my family as well too, and they're like, "Well, I'm going to take it anyway. I don't really care." And I'm like, "Oh, that's fine." And they were looking for the argument for me to debate them and tell them no and stop them. And I was like, "I'm not. You're a fucking grown ass adult. I am not telling you what to do with your life. I'm just saying for me and my own personal choices, I'm going to make what I feel is comfortable, and you make your own damn choices. Is it that fucking hard? Maybe the guy on the Titanic, if his wife would have just been like, all right, fine, go golfing. I wanted to go on this cruise or this Titanic ship. Maybe he wouldn't have experienced that bad thing. I'm just saying there's always a more of a concern for other people. And this is where Jordan Peterson talks about. It's because it's like the boy that saves his dad from the whale, like in Pinocchio. You will do anything, even if it's against their wishes, because you care about this person. So then I initially believe that a lot of people care about everyone around them. But I think it's in a very, very wrong way of caring. They care so much that they're going to dismiss that person's thoughts and that person's choices and conflate them with their own, and then try and control this person because they might not be following a rule or they might not be doing something else. It's kind of like when you're driving in a car and you get angry all of a sudden because someone cuts you off. It's because you're moving in a machine and you know at any moment your life could be taken because you are in something that is going 60, 70 miles an hour, and there's another person that's not paying attention that puts your life and maybe your family's life at risk. That's the big picture to look at. But it's very, very hard because we've been thinking in a lower state, I would say, for so long. I don't think I would be able to hold up a conversation with Jordan Peterson, but I think I understand a lot of the thoughts and a lot of the things that he says. And that's why, like, people say, well, 80% of your people that listen to you are women, or not women, are men. And he goes, 80% of the people on YouTube are guys that watch videos. It's not fucking, it's not mostly women on there. He goes, if my thing is 80% that it's men, doesn't mean I'm 100% man and I don't care for a woman supporter. He goes, if you look at a lot of people that buy my books, a lot of people that tweet at me saying good job, they're women. It's the society distorts this perception based on whatever you come in contact with on social media, and people just fucking run with that. And I think that's a different obstacle.
Yeah.
I
No.
ranted. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, again, yeah, man. With Jordan Peterson, though, like his ability to point those things out, it makes people mad, and why they get mad is beyond me, because let's take the 80% thing that you said, right? 80% of your audience is this. Well, no, I'm on YouTube, and 80% of the audience on YouTube. So therefore, I'm on this platform. And then you look at and go to Twitter. Twitter's 65% male, and I'm pulling these stats out of my ass. They're not real. So therefore, 65% of my audience on Twitter is male. Like, and that's horseshit. People, but they take that little nugget, that slice, and they take it out of context. And that's another big issue right now, is everything is taken out of context. And a lot of what Jordan Peterson says is factual data, but it doesn't fit the contextual, agenda of these, the folks who oppose him. And therefore, and there's no discussion. There is a my way or the highway mentality now. And that applies to the mask thing too. This is right. Our Lord and Savior, Dr. Fauci, said, if we wear a mask, if we wear 2 masks, we're super safe, right? And then if we only wear 1, we're kind of safe. And you know what I mean? Like, and they go hard. And for anybody that comes back and says, well, okay, true, in these settings, wearing a mask is an effective, non-pharmaceutical intervention. It's an NPI, and that works. But when we're outside and we're well over the social distance and we're moving, and that's one of the big issues with masks here in our current state, is being outside. So I run a lot, and there's some wonderful trails and parks around here, and I like to run in those trails and parks. And when I'm running, I don't wear a mask because I'm by myself, and I'm going to pass these people in less than 5 seconds. It's going to happen. They're moving the opposite direction of me. I'm not, freaking Usain Bolt setting records by any means, but I'm moving at a rate of speed to where there is going to be no cause or chance that I am going to contaminate them, and I am not afraid of them contaminating me. They're wearing a mask. I'm not. I'm good. They're walking. I'm running. We're going opposite directions. It should be fine. I have been stopped 3 times now, stopped running, and told that I needed to put a mask on.
I would have told them to go fuck themselves.
Well, so the first 2 folks were pretty okay about it. They were like, sir, we just want, you should probably be wearing a mask when you're out here. And I was like, yeah, thanks. I appreciate the concern, but I'm running. So, and it's been shown that there's medical issues that can come from running with a mask, right? Cause I guess oh shit, never mind. I'm not even going to say it cause I'm going to fuck it up. So
I would have even if it was nice, I would have told them to go fuck themselves. Because first of all, why the fuck are you wearing a mask? Okay, then why the fuck are you trying to control somebody else? I don't like. And oh my God, it's where people.
So let me finish this, because I'll really get you going here. So the third lady, and I had my reaction to her was very poor, because she came at me. She literally was walking on the opposite side of the trail, walked over to to put herself physically in front of me to stop me. So I stop and she's like, you need to wear a mask. And I'm like, you need to get out of my way.
Ooh, I would have elbowed.
And she's like, you're a danger. Da, 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 da. I said, ma'am, I was going to pass you in 5 seconds. You stopping me and having this interchange is putting you more at risk if I have the virus. So why don't you yell at me as I pass to put a mask on, and I will ignore you yelling at me and continue on my way. And our exposure is much less. You are making this worse. And she's like, well, according to da 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 da. I was like, I don't want to hear any of this. I'm gonna go run. You have a great day. And she's like, you're and she like started cussing at me. And I did. I looked at her. I was like, ma'am, fuck off. And I just went around running. Like it was so like she physically put herself in front of me to stop me. And here's the deal. It wasn't like it was a 1-lane path. This is a path in this park that you could fit 2 cars down, right? It could be a road that cars travel in opposite directions. It's that wide. So social distancing could have happened. The interaction time was super low. But she felt so compelled and believed so strongly that masks were the only way to keep everybody from dying, that she felt the need to put herself more at risk of contracting the virus by stopping me, ooh, little stroke out there, non-mask wearing dude running.
It's that vaccine shot you took.
I tell you what, man. No, that's causing my heart to do weird shit.
You got
But
one of those babies' cells that was developed with cocaine because it's
that'd be
the
awesome.
80s.
Yeah, man. I be going forever. But yeah, no, that blew my mind. That absolutely blew my mind that there was that type
See,
of.
then here's where I refute my own thing here about debates. That's not a debate, though. That's somebody forcing you to do something. And that's where I have an issue with. Like, people are like, why don't you ever pick a side, Robbie? Like, you never have your own opinions and thoughts on shit. I have my own thoughts, but I am also open to everybody's perspective. So I'm also, where someone brings up a point, like you bringing up a point that the Arby's, whatever, roast beef sandwich is fucking amazing. I fucking love it too. But I also want to look at the people that are fighting that thing. So we also have this in a discussion rather than just a bunch of people going, yep. And then it's end of discussion. We got a fucking hour to fill. God damn it. We got to, we got to keep the conversation going. But on an aspect of like, even when someone says like, if I was, let's say I didn't vote, I'll admit to that. But when someone says like, you better vote for Biden, my mind immediately goes, I'm voting for Trump. I just have this inner
Yeah.
fucking person that wants to refute authority. And it's not like, it doesn't boil down to like, I want to go fight cops or anything like that. It looks at it a perspective of like, who gave you the entitlement to think that you're better than me? Who gave you the type of mindset to think that you're more superior as a human being and you have way more power in this life than I do? And you could be able to control my own. It's a very, very big thing with me, which I believe the power of control is a corrupted one, and I think it's because when someone gives you so much power, you never want to give that power up. People wanted to defund the police not too long ago. We talked about this.
Mhm.
Then the places that defunded the police, Minneapolis, turned into a fucking Mad Max scenario and then ramped it back up 100%.
Yep.
They realized how bad it was getting. People were getting beat in the streets with steel bats. And I'm like, there is a logical way to do this. And I actually just saw this also. So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos this morning. One was talking about the Titanic survivor thing. The other one was the plane crash one. Another one was also a conversation between a hunter and a vegan about they have this like board table and it says agree on one side and disagree on the other. Then it's strongly agree all the way farther and strongly disagree on the other side. And they would take a glass and move it into position as a question was asked. And it was a criminal and a cop. Dude was busted for a bank robbery. He spent 25 years in prison and then he was out. And then there was a cop that had been on the force for 30 something years. And the idea was, do you think cops should have tasers? What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I agree too. The criminal guy disagreed, strongly disagreed. And he said that you shouldn't have that ability to be able to shock someone. The cop's like, what would you prefer? I just shoot him? And he goes, no, but he goes, people die from tasers. Cops like, nobody's died from a taser. It doesn't happen. I bet you there are some cases where a cop or some kid has probably died from a taser being shocked too much. That's not
But not because
good.
of the taser, but because there was an underlying condition that was
Yes,
exacerbated by the taser.
100%.
Yeah.
But when they're talking back and forth, he goes, I think that there should be a specific group of people that should have a taser. And I think when people started saying defund the police, I don't think you should defund the police. I think there needs to be a specific group of people or a specific certain test that we need. Just like for gun laws, some places you can walk right in and grab a fucking gun. Other places you got to wait a week. Other places you got to wait even longer than that. I think there needs to be a more thorough, clear system on a lot of these things that people are having issues with. It needs to be looked at again. Education got looked at again, and now people are starting to change the education system based on how it's been going wrong for so long. We're starting to understand mental health a lot more. Start looking at things with a clearer lens because now we have the time to do so. Instead of spending so much of this time trying to fight each other and argue and debate and do all these weird types of stuff where we're tearing each other apart, look clearer at the things that we're appointing. Back in the day, and I watched all, and I'm not even going to dive down. We're not going to talk about this, but I'm going to bring it up as an example. I watched the not George Floyd, the Derek Chauvin trial about George Floyd. All, I think it's still probably going on too. I think I've watched 4 days so far. I think they took off for Easter. I didn't see it that day. It's a religious day. We don't do that. But I was watching the case, and they were bringing up points, and then there was also clear evidence. And I think when it comes down to it, I don't think that person meant to kill that guy, but you cannot refute that he did something he shouldn't have done because he was neglecting. And I think this is where we look at, it's not an issue with cops. It's an issue with who we're appointing to be in there. And I think me and you both, and anybody out there listening, knows a person they probably went to school with where they find out they're a cop. You're like, oh my God, that guy became a cop. Like, you get scared because you know that person's not mentally sane enough to do that job. And it is and I understand the side of the cops too, with understanding the fact of like all the pressure that they're going through and everything like that. But you also have to understand, and they kept going, well, during the trial or whatever, they keep going back to the drug thing. That could be a factor, but it doesn't eliminate the fact that he did something he should not have done for 9 minutes and 30 something seconds, I think it was. We have to look at everything. Our judge system, for instance, back in the day, there used to be a thing called truth wizards. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. But it's specific people, you might have this ability, but you can sense bullshit. Like when someone like I talk to so many people where I can sense when someone's giving me a bit of a story, and I'm like, that's why you see my skeptical hippo face. I'm like, but Truth Wizards used to be a program back in the day where they would do this test to be able to see it. And a lot of these people that would pass these tests and find out they are Truth Wizards is that they could sense out bullshit. And we would appoint them in very specific positions, such as being a cop, being a judge, certain things that need to dictate what the truth is and find out what that truth is it really in a scenario. We're not really like, maybe we should dig that project back up and start to go back into it. I know people talk about like, well, it's much safer to eat plants than it is to eat meat. Back in the day, plant perception, man. I always bring that up.
Yeah, I would call bullshit on that because look at the
What, plant
chemicals that
perception?
yeah, because look at the chemicals that they're using to grow these plants. Like they can produce,
You're
a
right.
million acres of corn in uh, a third of the time that they used to, and they're doing that because of the chemicals and the fertilizers and all that stuff that there's. So I'm not saying it's not safe, like it's all going to kill you and whatever. But the argument that plants are 100% safe and meat is 100% bad, I would call total bullshit on that.
I,
There are
I,
non-GMO and organic and da, but even that. I think that's horseshit. I think because the food industry, just like everything else, it's got its dirty little secrets too.
This happened to
I
me
think,
when I was
and
I had an argument on Facebook with a buddy. Brian Bridges, if he's listening, he knows what it was about. He said that something bad about kale. And I was like, hey man, you got to understand like kale. And we just started getting into a debate. And I'm like, I had to stop? I had to go, I'm not dying on the hill of a vegan movement. I'm not even vegan. Like I'm fighting a vegan fight and I'm not doing, but I'm like, you have to understand the thoughts and perspectives that get brought into a conversation like that. Plants are definitely not 100% good for you. And meat is definitely not 100% good for you. Same thing with that hunter and vegan debate I was telling you about earlier with the board and they're moving agree to disagree. Humans are designed with canines and certain incisors meant to rip apart and meats.
yeah,
But the plant guy's not wrong either when it comes to the perspective of what he's talking about is a lot of the industrial farming that's going on. It's done in a very, very horrible way. And it's just because of how we associate and how we've been programmed to think of what we should care for. If you see a cow get shot by a farmer, you're like, okay, that's sad, but it's fucking going to be used for meat. You see a dog get shot by a farmer, depending on where you're from, it's going to look pretty fucking bad. That's why when some people go, well, they eat dog over there. That's fucking what they know. That's their morals. That's where they're from. That doesn't mean they're a bad fucking person. That's just in their mind, it's seen less than something else. If you kill a cow at all in India, you're fucking done.
Yeah.
Like that, they're sacred animals over there. And for us, it's just a easily dispensable item for food. So I'm like, understand there is no rights and wrongs. There's depending on the person and their perspective. I don't know. I hate to die on the perspective hill, but geez, man. But that back to that mask woman. That's what pisses me off is when someone wants to control someone else's shit. Worry about your goddamn self. Is it that hard? And my voice gets higher because I'm getting irritated. Like I'm tired of it, man. It's ridiculous. And I know people listening are like, "Oh my god, they're talking about COVID again. They're talking about the vaccine." I'm talking about it's just fucking crazy to say this is it and this is that and this is that when we should just keep that fucking spectrum. Be obtuse, not acute. You like that shit? That's angle fucking metaphors.
Yeah, but now you're talking about math, and math is dumb.
Pythagorean theorem is definitely a pain in the ass, but I
Math is
think it's probably
stupid.
important in something.
Yeah. So like let's again. Oh, there's a whole lot to unpack here. Let's go back to the George Floyd thing. And I'm with you. I think we're setting ourselves up for a no-win situation with that. Because either outcome is going to incite these crazy feelings of emotion. And either outcome, whether the guy goes to prison for the rest of his life or he gets off scot-free. Um, so in controlling your expectations is becoming something that is so almost impossible to do with people. Well, it's not that it's impossible. You're just not seeing it. People are refusing to check their emotions at the door, and their responses are these overt emotional responses. And I'm the kind of person that if I become emotionally compromised on a topic, I'm going to shut it down because I am not. My brain isn't going to put together a purposeful, solution driven conversation. My emotions become compromised, and now I'm picking up a pitchfork and a torch, and I'm gonna go freaking burn some shit because I'm upset, and I'm a human, so we all feel these things. And what scares me the most is that the reaction or what comes out of this trial is not going to be what people want, and they're not going to have that emotional control. So whatever the outcome is, we are doomed to shenanigans. Shenanigans will occur on either side of the spectrum, and I'm kind of in the middle. You know,
You're so rural.
you
That's
know,
what you are.
well,
You get it.
fuck off.
That's a reference to our
Yeah,
last episode.
I am incredibly rural. So I think right off the bat, from what I can see, old boy was wrong and needs to be punished for it. The cop, absolutely, 100%. And I don't like saying his name, but I think there may have been some other contributing factors, and I'm saying contributing factors to George Floyd's death. I think there may have been some other things that contributed to it. I'm not saying, you know what I mean. Again, leading off with, I think the cop was wrong for holding him down that way. I 100%, and I believe that was a contributing factor, but I think there were others. So to say that it's 100% his fault and he's dead because of this, I don't know if I'm ready to say that yet. I might be once the evidence comes out and we're paying attention, and if the evidence presents itself that yes, no, this dude would be alive and well today if these actions were not taken. Well, guess what? Then that's fucking murder, and that dude needs to go to prison for the rest of his life. So like I'm in a weird spot, but I'm refusing to get emotionally compromised. And there's a lot of other things. The shenanigans at the border and gun control are two issues that are kind of they're hot button items for me, and so I'm finding myself having to shut down a lot of reading and a lot of research and studying that I'm doing on these, because I'm finding myself, my bias is kicking me in the nuts, and I have to stop, because once my bias takes over, I'm not going to read that nugget of information that's the most important part.
I think
But
there's a logical way to take down certain ideologies and certain establishments, and I think the way that we're doing it is because we're finding out that we can just if we just do full force and rip everything from the floorboards. I think it's a long, consistent process. You notice every time we're about to reveal something or something huge is about to happen, something gets in our way, and then there's just a sudden lull for like a couple of months, and then it all sparks back up again. This happened with the riots and the statues being taken down. We were all like right on the cusp of something great. And then suddenly it all just started boiling back down and people went back to work and started forgetting about it. And, there was not as much action as there was being done in the very beginning. And I look at it like this. I am pro ripping up the floorboards of this foundation and government that we stand on, but I'm also in it for the long haul. I'm not in it for the short burst trying to get everything done in the last matter. And this is where I can rationalize with activists and a bunch of people that go to the extreme of throwing paint on a business or something like that. I see the perspective of you're trying to act and you want the change to happen as soon as possible, but sadly change does not happen immediately. Change is a process. And if you spend all your energy at once in that short burst, it's like a marathon. You run the first 1/4 of the marathon 100%. The second fourth of it, whatever the half of it, you're gonna get a little bit slower. Then you're gonna get slower, and then you're gonna come to a full stop when that one dude, the tortoise and the hare, that whole thing. Be in it for the long haul of stuff. I mean, I think there's certain things about our government and the foundations that we stand on that need to be slowly, one by one, looked at, examined, and then find a logical discourse with it. But it happens when you insert thoughts with emotion. Thoughts and emotions get conflated as the same thing, but they're actually two separate different things. Thought is thinking clearly about a situation and understanding and looking at the cause and effect of it all. Emotion is just acting because you're so angry over something where thought gets drowned out of it. When you get out of your car to go fight somebody because they cut you off in traffic, you're not thinking, you're acting. You're using emotion, you're using anger. And here's the issue is when you start looking at the judicial system, watching that whole entire trial, I was like, there's lies on both sides. The whole fucking thing, I was like, they're obviously covering up some stuff and they're obviously covering up some stuff. Everybody's covering up stuff because nobody wants to look like the loser. Nobody wants to do this. I'm like, there's a bigger issue. The fact that a life is lost. Let's talk about that. Let's look at that logically and find a way to make sure this doesn't happen again. But it turns into a motion thing and starts turning into an activist movement type thing. Man, it really pisses me off because someone brought this to my attention. I've been mentioning a lot. When you look at the media and the media tells you a certain ethnicity was killed, why are you telling me the ethnicity? Why don't you just tell me a person? And it's an issue, and also it's an important factor if we want to know more detail. We want specific examples. We want to be able to classify and label things because through research, all these other types of things, it helps us in a very good way. But for the public, for our thoughts, for our feelings, it's not good. It's programming. It's a way of showing you, well, this ethnicity actually dies more than this ethnicity. Okay, I get it. We're trying to labelize and classify and pull out statistics and try and pull out fact and science and stuff for this, but nobody's going to receive that information that way. They're going to take it with emotion and get pissed off. And then they're going to start doing things to try and change the spectrum up a little bit. And I'm like, we should look at it not as a certain ethnicity getting hurt. A person is fucking hurt. If you're a fucking parent, you have a kid and you lose a kid that's 30 years old, that's 30 years of life wiped off this earth. That doesn't, ethnicity does not fucking matter in that scenario. I'm sorry, I get very passionate about these things because I get upset because nobody's fucking looking at it like, what's a way we can fix this instead of fighting? And then you think, Abraham Lincoln, I think, said it, that a house divided cannot stand. When everything starts getting disrupted, but we're not disrupting it. We're just fucking acting out like a child, and then we get put back in line. As people, we need to look at everything from the government, everything that we're being surrounded in, and understanding this is a game and we need to make it not a game. We need to make it about what is right, what is true, what is this idea? And people go, well, that's a game. It's a winner and a loser. What's right? And I'm like, right is what's the real thing. What's the actual logical 100% evidence that this is this, not just because you feel a certain way and this needs to happen. What's wrong in this scenario, not because you're upset, you're conflating emotions with it. Look at it like a person is now dead. let's find a way to make sure that doesn't happen again. If it needs to be better variation on cops when you're looking at them closer, a harder test, or let's talk about the judicial system. Why is it okay? Go, go.
Celeste and Allie from the Taboos podcast they covered uh, police, right? The issue, and a few bad apples, I think was the name of the episode, or they had somebody, the doctor from the Few Bad Apples podcast on. Anyway, and they talked about the process, and I although her passion was more than I than I buy into, she brought up some good points. Celeste did that about the amount of training and the amount of time and all these things. These people come in, they do so much training, and then they get thrown out there to go be cops, and they have lethal force at their whim if they need it. And I think there is a time and a place for reform there. I think there is some additional training, but we have to look at the stopgap, and then money's a thing. Who's going to cover the bill to keep these guys in the academy for a year and a half instead of the 6 months that they're currently in? If it is a 6-month thing, I haven't looked into that. But there's the reformation to stop this, and the death part of that. I think we look at lives appear to be valued more when they're of a certain, I'm not going to say ethnicity, but they seem to be valued more when they are of a certain agenda. And this goes across all racial lines. You look at Chicago. Chicago, how many people die on a normal weekend in Chicago? What's the ethnicity? We're not talking about that. We're not looking at that. We're looking at,
The average death count in
this and
Chicago
that.
per year is like I think 200 something people die per
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. And it's heavy and it's hard. And then we look at, this situation or that situation. But we don't
But
look at
those are
those.
deaths like murder, not deaths of like natural causes or
Right. Right. Which is what we're talking about.
yeah. I'm just making
You know,
sure to
but-
clarify after
yeah.
listener.
Yeah.
Somebody listening is like 226 deaths in a year. That's fucking impossible. I'm like, fucking
That's like,
shaking my
that
head.
could be a day. Yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of derailing myself here. It does matter. Lives, every life that is taken in violence, in hate, in all those things should be respected. Absolutely. Lives that are taken unnecessarily, murder, hate crime, freaking whatever you call it, it does. It's a big fucking deal. And it does suck because that person's story was ended. It was over, and who knows what the potential story could have been had it not ended.
I think every 100 years there needs to be a change or there needs to be amendments to the way that we're living. And even maybe 50 years, maybe 20 years, I have no clue. But it seems like we're running on a system that was made 400 years ago, 300 years ago, and nobody's adapted to that change yet. And I think in the way that the world's evolved, where no one would have thought it would been, 10, 15, 20 years ago, I think we need to start looking at things a little bit more closely. We should start having trials and examinations of certain programs and departments and start looking at things very, very clearly and give the people a voice to vote. Because right now, I think the issue is that people don't really have a voice right now, not just a certain ethnicity, but all people really don't have a say. And I think the pandemic kind of highlighted that. Where I talk about a superior being one that's pulling all the strings, an Illuminati type. I don't consider that out of the realm of possibility because if we look, who's to stop our government from making one of us disappear? It happens in China. It's not any different here. They just China's open about their shit. China is like, I don't give a fuck what you guys want to put me on CNN. I don't give a shit. America's like, we got to do it in a better way. We got to do it in a more secret way. And I think eventually it's going to get to the point where we're going to lose all control. And next thing you know, they're going to be in full control. Who's to say we even have the steering wheel now? I think there's about the time we all start putting our hands together and start putting it on top of the steering wheel and saying, hey, this is my life. I want to do what I feel like I need to be doing. I should have control of my own life, right? Based on whatever your decisions, as long as you're not hurting anybody, I don't see an issue in that. But my issue right now is the fact that there's something else that is driving us all certain directions and splitting us more apart. And once we fully get that last pinky on that hang in there kitty poster, like we're hanging from the tree bench by our fucking pinky. It's not like Scary Movie 2 where the dude has a deformed hand and it's strong as fuck. No, it's like we're hanging on by a little
My
pinky.
strong hand.
Yeah, it's my strong hand. But once that pinky lets go, we're out. We lost control. And that's what comes with goalpost moving. A lot of people don't understand is once that goalpost keeps going and going and going, the issue is when you give someone power, they never want to give that up. If I tell you you're going to be the teacher of this class for the next year and a half, then a year and a half comes. Sorry, you got to give me back the power. You're like, but these kids fucking know me and like me way better than they like you. It becomes this game, this type of scenario where it's like when you get too much power. And I think that was the whole point of having limited powers in our government, right? But our government seems to have a lot more power than we like to think that they do. And it's funny because whenever you're on is when I start getting really government. And it's funny because I think the very first podcast you did, like, we can't talk too much about this because it's my job. There you go. There's my issue with authority. You told me not to, and now my brain subconsciously keeps telling me I need to go to this one topic because I feel like you should have full discourse. You know, why is a place or a private account on a Twitter on a PhD academic talking about um these thoughts are my own? They should be. They should not reflect your school just because you went to school there. It's your fucking personal account. But people say these thoughts are my own. It's like they have to explicitly say that so their school does not get in trouble for the things that they say. And I'm like, it's
That's a liability issue. That's a huge, and for us, it's the Hatch Act. Like we are bound by the Hatch Act to a very specific things that we can do and we cannot do, and what we can say and what we cannot say. And the Hatch Act was written forever ago, before social media even existed, and now they're trying to catch up with social media. But here's the deal: you see a picture of me in uniform on my personal page.
sexy little devil.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I appreciate it. Thank you. So you are going to associate, because of that picture, me with that organization. And so even if I put the little legal blurb, all thoughts and opinions on this page are of my own and don't reflect that of the freaking United States, blah, 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 whatever that might be, you are going to perceive that. And that's what they're worried about. They're worried about, because even though I put that little blurb in there, I am still a representation of that organization. And so that's a thing. And my employment, my working with that organization is voluntary. I choose to, right? So by choosing to work there, I have to subject myself to the rules and regulations that govern that. And so for with these doctors, it gets a little weird. And I'm with you on this one. It is horseshit, because the PhDs, these academics, these folks should be able to research, develop, find, just dig, and put opinions out that are, whether they are congruent or incongruent to the beliefs and structures, if they follow the evidence and the evidence shows them this, they should be able to freely, without fear, put that evidence out there and say, hey, this is what we found. I'm going to plug it real quick. Robert E. Lee and Me is the name of the book. Ty Sedgwick was the history department head at the military academy at West Point. Awesome dude.
I know two people that are related to Robert E. Lee. They
That's
won't
awesome.
say it now though because the way the world is now. But back in the day, they were like, "Yeah, we're found." Actually, I was talking to one of my friends, and he had an old dagger from Robert E. Lee, and he was like, "Yeah, that was my whatever great whatever." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And then my other buddy was like, "Hey, that's yeah, this is Robert E. Lee's pipe. He's my great." And I was like, "Hey, what's funny is that you and my other buddy both say that it's your great," and then they found out they're related. Fucking interesting little tidbit there. Sorry.
But no, he, coming to grips with, he's a Virginian gentleman who grew up revering Robert E. Lee as in the 60s and 70s. And it's his story of him coming to grips and to the realization that that mentality was wrong and how that mentality was wrong. And he followed the evidence to the point where it was completely counter to everything that he knew growing up. And I was very similar. And actually, he was the guy that challenged me the very first time. I made a mention, I was in a session with him, and I made mention about Robert E. Lee. And he looked at me and he goes, he was a traitor. and was a terrible person. I was like, whoa, hold on, we're not going to just blow past that one. Let's talk about that for a sec. Uh, and he challenged my viewpoint on something that I had firmly believed in. He was writing the book at the time, so he couldn't give me the thesis, but a lot of the evidence he cited in the book, and that was his big thing. He's like, Ian, don't let your bias take you down the road of wherever. Follow the evidence. And for an academic, for a doctor, for these scientists, they need to follow the evidence. And if the evidence takes them to a place that is socially uncomfortable, well, fuck that. Put that shit out there. And that's what you're seeing. And that's why, like, initially, I was a huge Fauci supporter, huge, and loved it. And it wasn't until I would say the last few months where I've started to kind of question some of that, because there's some other stuff that's coming out, and you're starting to see some other studies from scientists of equal chops. You know what I mean? Other epidemiologists are coming out and saying, well, maybe, and it seems as though those thoughts and opinions are counter to whatever narrative needs to be said, and therefore they are discredited, or they're disallowed, or I'm not going to use the word cancel culture, because it's not that. It's,
Gatekeeping.
they're, yeah,
I don't like that term, but it's kind of what's happening with our social media. It's like if I had a stream of information, and instead of keeping it a full stream for everyone that's down the river to be able to enjoy, I turn it and dam it up to only a little trickle comes through. It's like we're only getting a little squirt of information rather than the full stream.
and the information that we're getting is biased, and it's of one view. It's okay for this, but it's not okay for that, and that's a whole nother conversation that we could talk about for hours. But it's yeah, man. And there should be total freedom. There should be total openness for scientific and academic study, regardless of the outcome of what we find. Publish the
Isn't life the pursuit of happiness? Then why am I so damn unhappy?
well, people could argue that, there's mental health things that you can do to address that.
I could do fucking yoga, but
You could.
It's not my flow. Sorry.
Jonathan Haidt, the happiness hypothesis. Oh, Jesus Christ. I tell you, man, I'm stroking out so hard today. The happiness hypothesis. You should read that book.
I'll stick to my George Takei sleep audio tapes that go one sheep, two sheep. Oh my.
But yeah, man, that's
It's the way the cookie crumbles, my friend.
That's the way the fucking cookie crumbles. Stupid.
Where can people find you, Ian?
They can find me anywhere. I am on Twitter and Instagram. Just search Y Whiskey or Whiskey Y. Either way, you'll find me there. I'm there.
You said I can find you anywhere. Does that mean I can find you in my pantry eating all my Pop-Tarts?
If they are the brown sugar and cinnamon Pop-Tarts, then yes.
You nasty son of a bitch.
Oh, see? Why am I a nasty son of a bitch? I like something different. I thought we talked about this.
That's like the one that's always left in the store. Whenever I go, I'm like, there's that one that no one eats.
My desire and my love of brown sugar and cinnamon,
That's okay. I used to hate unfrosted Pop-Tarts. Now I actually enjoy them.
I'm gonna pull myself back from calling you a heathen, but okay.
I used to not like the strawberry ones. I always used to want chocolate, and then I got sick of the chocolate ones. Like someone in my family buys Pop-Tarts all the time, and he got the bacon ones when they came out, and he was like, "This is gonna be amazing. I love bacon." And then he ate it. He was like, "It was horrible." I was like, "Yeah." Sometimes you hype it up too much in your head and don't look at the logical fact that mixing bacon with a delicious breakfast dessert, diabetes, my friend. That's as far as you can go with it.
That's, those things, like one package of those is like 400 calories.
Yeah. America, the world. I don't know. I don't think it's just America. I think that's every place has different variations of Pop-Tarts, just in different languages. Pop-Tarts is
Pop-Tart by another name. Is it still, or what's a flower by another?
Poop-Tart.
Poop-Tart. No, that's not okay.
Tart of pop. That's what they do. They just reverse the wording.
Some Midwestern shit right there. If you can start throwing that pop.
Do you prefer? Hold on, I need to end on this because this is important. Do you heat them up in the microwave or you toast them?
Toast them. If you put them in the microwave, they get that weird bubble thing that grows in.
I wouldn't expect anything more from a rural person.
Well, hey, we didn't have microwaves growing up as a kid. Back on the farm, we just had toasters. And sometimes we had to heat them up with the
We
fire.
didn't have toasters. We had to eat them straight out of the package if you live in an urban area like myself.
Oh, well, I mean, there you go.
You with
shoulda
your
come out to the
damn rural
you
privilege.
should have come out to the country and we could have lent you our toaster because we're good that way. We're good neighbors out here in the rural side of life.
You know that used to be a thing, is asking your neighbor for a thing of sugar, even though everyone has
Did it?
fucking sugar, but it's a way of understanding who your neighbors were. Who are these people that are living in the place right beside you so you can better know your community? But that doesn't happen anymore. Now we just see their Facebook post or some type of police thing they did and wonder why they're introducing themselves to the neighborhood is because they did something horrible.
I will say this though. So like as a kid, I would go over, like my mom would be like, "Hey, go ask Mrs. Joe if she's got a stick of butter we can borrow." And I run over there and grab a stick of butter from Mrs. Joe and come back. Now on Facebook, like we have these community groups that we're in, and legit, somebody will post on there, "Hey, does anybody have a stick of butter I can get?" And you'll
I
get
wouldn't expect
five,
anything
five
more
or
from
six
you.
people. You're like, "Fuck yeah, here we go!" Next thing you know,
Part
like,
of the damn neighborhood watch. Go to the damn store and get yourself a stick of butter.
well, what if the store's closed? What if you live out in Yuma at YPG and the freaking your grocery store is 30 miles away?
Well, then whatever you're making, you're not eating.
Hmm? Well, sometimes shit happens. You need to rely on your neighbors for some help, and you get your help. So
We
quit
could
being
all
such a
rely on
fucking could
somebody.
being such an isolationist there in
Maybe if I
your
relied on
urban
you,
environment.
but worried about myself, and then everyone just relied on their neighbor, but then worried about themselves, maybe we live in a better place if you knew someone was taking care of you. Or that's maybe the perception of why everyone's telling you to put a mask on while you're running.
Mm, true.
I would have elbowed somebody at that point.
I'm usually pretty level, brother. I am. I am usually just a
That can
smooth,
fluster anybody.
but man, I have not cussed at somebody like that in years.
Okay, so what'd you really say? Because you
Outside
told
of
me,
the military.
what'd you really say? Because you told me a logical answer. You're like, ma'am, actually, the more time you stopped me, you gave me like this whole logical response. What'd you really say?
That's exactly what I said.
You
And I
said
told
you
her,
just cursed.
I told her to fuck off.
You didn't say that in the original statement.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did.
The record is changing, Your Honor. The record is changing.
No, I did. I told her to fuck off or fuck something. I don't know. Fuck was used. And then I left.
Okay. All right. Well, at least you're human,
Yeah.
not
Dude,
some reptilian Hillary Clinton type.
mm,
That's another podcast down the line.
that is.